Thank you, Mr Speaker. This House, one, calls on the New South Wales Government to immediately support the establishment of a Royal Commission into water management in New South Wales. 2, calls on the New South Wales Government to fully cooperate with the Royal Commission, including the compulsory production of water modelling data, licences, compliance records, enforcement action and the intergovernmental agreements. 3, notes that the current water management framework has failed rural communities, irrigators and regional towns, is based on deeply flawed, opaque and contested modelling and has been characterised by systematic compliance and enforcement failures and has resulted in profound loss of trust in government institutions responsible for water management. 4, notes that these failures have caused serious social and economic and environmental harm across regional New South Wales, undermining livelihoods, community viability and river health, and asserts that only a Royal Commission with full comprehensive powers can restore public confidence, expose wrongdoing and deliver the transparency, accountability and reform that regional communities deserve. So I begin, Mr Speaker, by saying that the Murray-Darling Basin Plan was meant to be one of Australia's great national projects to make sure our rivers are healthy, our food production is secure and our regional communities are strong. Instead, more than a decade on, what we see across the basin is confusion, division and serious collapse in trust. This is why we need a federal Royal Commission into water management into the Murray-Darling Basin. And let me be clear, this is not a new idea. This is not a radical idea. This is an idea New South Wales Parliament itself debated on the 7th of August 2019, including the Premier, Chris Minns, a former shadow water minister at the time, who voted with his colleagues in favour of a federal Royal Commission into administration of the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. This was based on the recommendation of the 14th of May 2018 from the Portfolio Committee No. 5 of the Legislative Council, a committee which included the current New South Wales Treasurer, Daniel Mookie, and the current Minister for the Environment, Heritage and Climate Change, Penny Sharp. Recommendation 8 was that the New South Wales Government support a federal Royal Commission into the administration of the Murray-Darling Basin. The recommendation did not come from activists. It came from a parliamentary committee after evidence from experts, communities and water users across the state. Yet, earlier today in question time, the Premier backflipped, saying he would not support a federal Royal Commission into this matter. Then on the 7th of August 2019, in a public interest debate in this very House, members called for a federal Royal Commission after the Natural Resources Commission found that water management decisions had pushed parts of the Barwon Darling into hydrological drought 3 years earlier than upstream sections. Support for the federal Royal Commission has never been confined to one political party. Senior members of the National Party, including the former Water Minister, Melinda Pavey, and the Deputy Premier, John Barilaro, formally wrote to the federal counterparts requesting a federal Royal Commission into water management. On the 27th of February 2020, Mr Barilaro and Melinda Pavey renewed calls for a Royal Commission into the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, referencing a petition signed by concerned irrigators. Both Labor and Nationals have, at different times, supported exactly what is being proposed today. This is a call to honour positions already taken. We recognised the problem in 2018, we debated in 2019 and it was raised again in 2020. 6 years later, in 2026, we are still living with the consequences of not acting on it. The Basin Plan is one of the largest public policy interventions in Australian history. It involves billions of dollars of public money and affects millions of Australians. This means farmers, Indigenous communities, rural towns, irrigation districts and downstream environments. When reform is that large, the standards must be simple. People must be able to see the evidence, understand the decisions and trust the accounting. Yet too often decisions have felt murky to the communities most affected. Science and modelling are contested, assumptions are disputed, accountability is fragmented across jurisdictions. The deeper problem here is that trust has broken down. Communities do not trust the process, farmers don't trust the numbers, and the environmental outcomes are disputed. Governments do not trust stakeholders, and stakeholders do not trust governments. After massive water recovery and enormous disruption, environmental outcomes remain unclear in the eyes of many basin communities. We still see the fish kills. We've got one today. We still see blue-green algae. They're all over the state. and we still see river systems under stress. We oppose the Murray-Darling Basin Plan and further water buybacks in the absence of clear, independently verified economic and social and ecological outcomes. So, two basic questions remain unanswered. What outcomes did we actually sign up to, and were they pursued in the most effective, transparent way? This is exactly what a Federal Royal Commission is for. Not to grandstand, not to politicise, but to test independently and in the open, under oath, so Australians can have confidence that the system is being run with integrity, because good policy survives scrutiny, and when policy cannot withstand scrutiny, the responsible action is not to defend the process, it is to fix it. Nowhere is the cost of this failure clearer than in rural communities. Towns have lost jobs, businesses and services. Water buybacks remove productive capacity, often without the transparent local impact assessment communities expected. Yet remarkably, no single independent inquiry has ever put the full balance sheet on the table. Too often communities have asked to accept that pain was necessary without ever being shown clearly how costs and benefits were measured or are measured and verified. A Federal Royal Commission would finally examine the whole picture to deliver real results without treating communities as collateral damage, and that's exactly what's happening. A further critical issue is the science, modelling and data integrity. We have a situation where different experts using the same data reach different conclusions. A Royal Commission is the only way to deliver. It shines a light and it forces bureaucrats and politicians to tell the truth, which is what we are wanting. Communities who live with water policy every day deserve to know what decisions are transparent and defensible. Australians deserve the truth, and a Federal Royal Commission is how we get it.
I thank the member. The question is the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Cessnock.
Remember what you said in 2019?
Thank you very much, Speaker. And I always support and applaud the passion of the member for Murray, and have been engaged and interested enough to attend a number of her information sessions over recent years, which always add to my level of understanding of water issues and just how complex they are. I rise to advise the House that the New South Wales Government does not support this motion, noting the idea that the New South Wales Government has not done any reviews or inquiries into the Basin Plan is simply not correct. I note that the call from the member for a Royal Commission into Water New South Wales, it is important to note that there have already been countless reviews, and I know the Premier referred to these earlier today in question time, but I'll go through some of them. And I want to put a bit of a timeline stamp on this because, as the member pointed out, there was the motion in 2019, there was support from the opposition at the time in 2019. A number of these inquiries that have taken place since then are worth noting. I'm not sure exactly on the timing of the South Australian Royal Commission in comparison to the motion that was moved in this House, but there has been a South Australian Royal Commission into the Basin Plan completed in 2019. We've also had a second review by the Productivity Commission into the implementation of the Basin Plan in 2023. That followed one in 2018. So 2023 is after that vote. 3 independent reviews into the water for the Environment Special Account and the 450 gigalitre recovery program. Those independent reviews took place in 2020, 2021 and 2025, which is after the motion that the member has referred to, and I voted on that occasion to support the member's motion. There's been a Senate inquiry in 2023. In New South Wales Parliament at the moment, we have an ongoing New South Wales Legislative Assembly inquiry chaired by the member for Barwon into the same legislation and the impacts into New South Wales communities. There was an ACCC inquiry into water markets in the Murray-Darling Basin completed in 2021, which again was after that vote and motion that the member referred to. There's been an independent assessment of social and economic conditions in the basin, led by Robbie Sefton, and that was completed in 2020. There's also been an Australian National Audit Office performance audit of strategic water purchasing in 2023. There's been Senate inquiries. There's been the multi-jurisdictional management and execution of the Murray-Darling Basin Plan Senate inquiry completed in 2021. And of course there was the integrity of the water market inquiry in 2018, which was prior to the vote we are talking about. And there was the integrity of the water market, sorry, I'm repeating myself. A House of Representatives federally inquiry into the management and use of Commonwealth environmental water also took place back in 2018. And since that particular vote in this House in 2019, there has been the permanent appointment of the Independent Inspector General of Water Compliance, the Honourable Troy Grant, who served in this House, was the leader of the National Party and the Deputy Premier. I know that he is working through trying to make sure that compliance is put in place as well. Of course, the Inspector General can only work on the compliance as per the compliance issued and the rules around compliance created by the states. The Murray-Darling Basin Authority are required to review the Basin Plan this year. And public consultation on this project, as I understand it, is due to start and will be continuing for the next 12 weeks. It will be the Murray-Darling Basin Plan 2.0, I think a lot of people refer to it as. And this is an excellent opportunity around influence to the design of the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. I know that the member for Murray has considerable concerns around the South Australian what are they called? What are those things, Helen, that they catch the water and create barrages? Thank you very much. And I've watched a short video clip around that, which is very informative and helpful for people to understand. The New South Wales Government is delivering the Murray-Darling Basin Plan commitments in partnership with the Australian Government to support river health, access to water and better water efficiencies. The New South Wales also, while supporting the Basin Plan, does not support water buybacks. And we expect the Australian Government to honour its commitment to us and to New South Wales communities to ensure that we get water recovery through projects, programs and infrastructure rather than relying solely on buybacks. And that's why we won't be supporting the motion moved by the member today.
The question is the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Cootamundra.
I rise to support today's debate on the need for a Royal Commission into water management and thank the member for Murray for bringing this important matter to the House. The member represents communities in the Southern Basin who know all too well the cost of poor water policy to the environment, to irrigation industries and to the long-term viability of regional communities. It should not surprise anyone in this chamber that when it comes to delivering the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, New South Wales has carried a significant share of the burden among basin states. In 2013, the nation committed to recovering 2750 gigalitres of water for the environment, more than 5 Sydney harbours worth. Much of that recovery was achieved through buybacks, which have had profound consequences. In parts of the Southern Basin, they contributed to business closures, job losses and economic contraction, impacts that communities such as Griffith, Leeton and Deniliquin are still working to overcome today. That was evident when residents took to the streets in protest following the introduction of federal Labor's Restoring Our Rivers Bill, fearing that even more water would be taken from productive use. And as we have seen, this is exactly what has happened. As a rural member of this House, representing an electorate that proudly sits along the Murrumbidgee River, I recognise that maintaining a healthy river system is essential. At the same time, water for irrigation is critical to New South Wales's and the nation's food security. That reality matters even more today as families continue to face elevated prices at the supermarket checkout. It is the responsibility of both state and federal governments to strike the right balance, to protect the environment while supporting farmers and industries feed and clothe the nation. Yet in New South Wales, under Labor governments, that balance is far from assured, as we continue to see decisions, including changes to water sharing plans and intergovernmental agreements, that reduce the reliability of the water available to general security licence holders. And when irrigators pay more for their water for their crops, it inevitably flows through to higher prices for consumers. Even more concerning are the clear failures we've seen in the government's management of environmental water. On the 6th of August last year, the Natural Resources Access Regulator issued a stop work order at Taral National Park, alleging the operation of certain infrastructure had not fully accounted for all of the water taken. Soon after, the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder paused environmental water deliveries in New South Wales, citing convoluted metering rules introduced by the state government. In other words, the changes had, quote, introduced significant complexity and uncertainty, impacting our ability to deliver Commonwealth environmental water, end quote. Let me be clear. Water reform in this country has been a multi-billion-dollar exercise funded by the taxpayers. Yet time and again, problems surface, red tape grows, and confidence in the system erodes. And after all this investment and upheaval, we are now told that the lower Murray River is in a critically endangered state. At the same time, serious issues such as the growing carp population remain inadequately addressed, problems that cannot be solved by simply sending more water downstream. After more than a decade of flawed policy, communities across New South Wales deserve answers on how water, our most precious resource in this dry nation, is being managed. Without transparency and accountability, members risk standing in this chamber 10, 20, 30 years' time having the same arguments about the same failures. It is disappointing to hear that the New South Wales Labor government will not support a Royal Commission, especially given that Premier Minns, having spent 3 years in this place as Shadow Water Minister, led his Labor colleagues, along with the member for Cessnock, in calling for a Royal Commission on the 7th of August 2019. Recognising that the issues span multiple governments and remain largely unresolved, a Royal Commission would provide the independent scrutiny needed to understand what has gone wrong and how to fix it. Most importantly, it would help us chart a path forward in which the environment, industry and communities are equally valued, not set one against the other.
The question is the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Barwon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. That was unexpected. Speaker, I rise to support the member for Murray and the call for a Royal Commission into water management. This debate has been had many times in this chamber and nothing seems to change, because here we are again. The longer governments resist transparency and accountability in water management, the harder it becomes for the public to have confidence that all is well in water. Major inquiries such as the South Australian Murray-Darling Basin Royal Commission in 2019, the Vitesse report in 2019 that investigated the Menindee fish deaths, and the Natural Resource Commission's Canary report and review of the Barwon-Darling water sharing plan, also from 2019, have all identified significant issues with how water is being managed in New South Wales. These findings are well known to communities across the state. Knowing who holds interests in water is essential for restoring trust in government decisions that affect people living along our rivers. When water rights were attached to land, ownership was transparent. Why should we resist returning to a system that provides the same visibility? While water trading is a national issue requiring federal action, transparency around water ownership is a critical first step to ensuring decisions are made in the public interest, not shaped by private interests. At present, a perception is that private interests are being served, and this perception is eroding trust in government. A Federal Royal Commission represents the highest standard of transparency and accountability. Unlike other inquiries, it compels full disclosure. People can't choose whether they show up and give evidence. If they're told to show up, they have to show up and give evidence, which was the problem with South Australia. Mr Speaker, every card is on the table, not just the convenient ones. The need for a Federal Royal Commission has been reinforced by bureaucrats refusing to give evidence at the South Australian Royal Commission, concerns about state-based bias and the limitations of existing processes. At the heart of this issue, Mr Speaker, is trust. If we want the public to believe that water decisions are being made fairly and in their interest, a Federal Royal Commission is the necessary first step in rebuilding that trust. Too often, governments treat information as something to guard rather than share. It was only last year that I attempted to amend the Water Management Act to prohibit the state from entering into intergovernmental agreements with other jurisdictions about matters concerning the Murray-Darling Basin until 15 days had passed after a draft of the intergovernmental agreement has been made available to members of the Legislative Assembly and Legislative Council. And Mr Speaker, that's off the back of multiple intergovernmental agreements being signed that weren't always in the interest of the people of New South Wales, whether it's environment or whether it's agriculture. They seem to serve other states better than they served us. The bill did not pass, but the idea was to ensure transparency and accountability in the agreements this state enters. Over the years, both sides of politics have supported the call for a Royal Commission. You are both on the record supporting that, and it's time to see that commitment through. Being in Parliament is not about protecting power. It is about serving the people of New South Wales. If this House chooses not to support a Federal Royal Commission, it is acting against the wishes of the majority of those who we are here to represent. It is time to listen to the community, to commit to transparency and to support a Federal Royal Commission. Speaker, to prove my point that nothing has changed and that action is needed, this speech is almost word for word what I delivered at the petition debate in 2020. Nearly 5 years, it's too long. We need transparency in water. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
I thank the member. The question is the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Albury.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise to support the member for Murray and her call for a Royal Commission into the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. Not because the Basin Plan doesn't matter, it does. Not because environmental outcomes aren't critical, they are. It is because we need to bring all the evidence before us together and ensure governance and implementation settings are delivering balanced, sustainable outcomes. I want to start with a practical example. Last month, I visited Charlie Carp, responding to an invitation in Deniliquin, the member for Murray's electorate, a regional manufacturing business turning an invasive pest species into a high-value product with strong domestic demand and export potential. This business is delivering environmental benefit, regional jobs and economic activity, yet their biggest challenge is securing reliable feedstock, despite the basin being saturated with carp biomass. That contradiction goes to the heart of the problem. The issue isn't intent, the issue isn't innovation, the issue is how the Basin Plan operates in practice. Speaker, water security is critical to regional communities and the industries that sustain them, and I know everyone in this chamber would agree with that. Businesses like Nice Rice in Jerilderie demonstrate what is possible when water policy supports productive use. That operation underpins local employment, supports growers and contributes directly to the social and economic fabric of the town. When water becomes unreliable or policy settings shift without regard to local consequences, it is not just that production that suffers, it is entire communities. Schools, services and regional confidence depend on water being managed in a way that recognises its economic and social value alongside environmental objectives. The Basin Plan cannot succeed if it treats water only as an environmental input rather than as a foundation of regional livelihoods. Speaker, this debate is also timely. Just this afternoon, another fish kill reported at Menindee in the Sydney Morning Herald. This morning, journalists were being briefed on the Basin Plan Mark 2 discussion paper. Decisions made now will shape the next generation of basin management. This is the critical moment. If we are serious about getting this right, this is precisely the time to examine all available evidence and ensure decisions are not tainted by short-term or partisan politics. The risk otherwise is that we simply repackage the same problem under a new label. Previous studies and inquiries reveal several consistent themes. Firstly, fragmented governance and unclear accountability. Confusion persists between the roles of the Commonwealth, the states, the MDBA and delivery agencies. Decisions are made still in silos, often with no single entity responsible for outcomes. Secondly, economic and social impacts treated as secondary considerations. Regional communities continue to tell us that socio-economic impacts are assessed late, inconsistently or not at all, particularly in relation to water recovery and buybacks. Third, a disconnect between policy design and on-ground reality. The inability to enable carp harvesting at fishways, which I just touched on, already occurs in other jurisdictions such as South Australia. It is a clear example of policy rigidity overriding common sense. Fourth, erosion of trust and social licence, and it's been touched on several times here. Communities speak of decisions being imposed rather than negotiated. Consultation without influences and outcomes that appear predetermined. Speaker, none of this argument is against river health. It is an argument that environmental outcomes cannot be sustained without credible governance, transparency and community confidence. A Royal Commission provides the scope and independence to examine whether governance arrangements are fit for purpose, whether decision-making has been evidence-based and transparent, and whether the basin's institutional architecture enables or inhibits regional adaptation and innovation. Speaker, I also note the inconsistency we heard in question time today, when the Premier said he was not convinced that a Royal Commission is the correct way forward, yet the Parliament in 2019, during a debate moved by the member for Cessnock, the Premier supported a call for a Royal Commission. So I'm going to finish with the lines that the member for Cessnock concluded this debate back in 2019. He said, "It is the least political motion that could have come before the House. It is about water. I urge all members to support the motion, and as the member for Cessnock did then, I do now."
The question is the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Wagga Wagga.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and good to have you there in the chair. I rise to make a brief contribution to this debate, and I want to acknowledge the member for Murray and thank her for bringing this motion, which is a very important topic, and I think putting on the table again the need for a Royal Commission is incredibly important. I acknowledge the first of all, I acknowledge the issues that have been raised by people in the debate so far, and in particular, clearly the impact of the plan on regional communities, and certainly in my part of the world. Yes, there is a need to look after the environment, look after the needs of the river, but the impact of the plan on communities in my region has been very significant in terms of agriculture, and that's a very significant impact for the nation, and it threatens to continue. But I just want to briefly add a couple of comments about this issue of complexity. I had no idea, I have to say, coming from a health background when I entered this place, about the complexity of the water issues, and they are absolutely diabolical. There's no question about that. And look, speakers have spoken already about the impact on communities, the impact on agriculture, but I just want to give two examples in my electorate, in Wagga, which is relatively, it's not as nearly as involved perhaps as the member for Murray's electorate, but and it's based around a big city, but there's a couple of areas where the plan has an impact. The first is in the Reconnecting River Country program. Now, many people would not have heard of the Reconnecting River Country program. It's a program that's designed to better use environment water by allowing selective flooding or inundation of properties. It's a SIDLAM project, a Sustainable Diversion Limit Adjustment Mechanism project. It's designed to avoid water buybacks, which is why I actually support it. It's a program that probably should have been in place years ago, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, was never implemented. But this current government has launched out on that, and after a couple of years, they've begun talking to farmers downstream from my part of the world about the implications of this. And I've got landholders in my electorate who are very worried about this program, and the fact that the government wants to acquire easements on their properties, flow easements. Now, I'm not actually sure that flow easements have ever been obtained before. That's how complex this is. They've got easements for transmission lines, but now we've got this concept of flow easements, which will give the government a permanent right to inundate the property of the landholders. Now, landholders are extremely worried about the impact of that, and there is an alternative, deeds of release. There's a bill coming before this House, I suspect in the next few weeks, where this will be debated, but the needs for deeds of release, can I say, is absolutely critical as an alternative for those landholders. They need to have proper notifications of inundation with warnings and with penalties when those levels are exceeded, and they need to fund mitigation works, and there needs to be fair compensation, especially for the farms that could become essentially unusable because of the flooding and inundation. That's just one complex area. Another one is the management of storage and the prevention of flooding. Now, the priority in the current system is to maintain dams as full as possible, always ready for the next drought. And we are on the verge of significant dry conditions. And so that's the priority. But every time we get rain and it starts flooding, particularly in Wagga, those dams are full to billy-o and they're just ready to tip over and spill. And I've seen that a couple of times in my term as a member. And the people in Wagga, and particularly the people in North Wagga, are extremely concerned about that. And I'm always arguing at the Airspace Committee, the Airspace Management Committee. This is a committee that monitors the level of the dam and the level of airspace above the dam, right? Yes, I'm always arguing to keep that airspace safe enough for the community in Wagga. After the major flooding in 2012, where the CBD of Wagga was actually evacuated, a levee was built. That was great. Guess what? Insurance premiums haven't changed. They've gone up for properties, even despite the fact that the levee was built. So that's 3 examples of the water system and the river system being incredibly complex. Now, I just want to add to the call for a National Royal Commission the fact that there's been a Royal Commission, that South Australia had a Royal Commission. And I think that Royal Commission that the South Australians held has dominated discussion of the plan and focused everyone's mind on the need to get water to South Australia. And New South Wales has not fought back. I actually think we need to have a Royal Commission of our own, but at the very least, I agree with the member for Murray, we need to have a National Royal Commission to at least redress the balance. I think the public discourse balance that's prejudiced in favour of South Australia and its compromised landholders in our state of New South Wales. So I support this motion.
The question is the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Murray in reply.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd like to thank the members for their contributions. The member for Cessnock, he doesn't think that we need a review, but apparently, we know that the recommendations from the 2018 Portfolio Committee number 5 recommendation was to have a Royal Commission, and we need one. The only thing that's changed is the date. We still have the same problems. I'd like to thank the member for Cootamundra. She highlighted the rorting and the problems, the red tape, the failures. She talked about Premier Minns being 3 years as Shadow Water Minister. He knows the problems. He knows the problems, and it's time for Labor to actually address some of these issues, and that is to have an equal weighting with the socio-economic and environment. That's what we want, and that's been taken away from us. I'd like to thank the member for Barwon. He talked almost the same speech that we had in 2019, almost the same. As I said, nothing's changed, only the date. He wants more accountability. Trust has been eroded, and he has full support. We have full support behind the Royal Commission. I'd like to thank the member for Albury. He spoke of a lot of contradictions in the Basin Plan, and there is, always. It is so difficult to get any sense out of it. He talked about how the Basin Plan operates, and how water is so very important and it underpins communities. And really, what we're fighting over, or what we're discussing, is only 2% of the water that falls on New South Wales, 2% for production. And the way that it's portrayed is that farmers are taking so much water from the environment that it's causing all of this. It's not. It's about transparency, accountability, and water management that's at risk. The member for Albury also talked about the fish kills. We've got another fish kill in Menindee. And of course I mentioned too about the blue-green algal blooms right across the state, making water unusable for us. I'd also like to thank the member for Wagga, who spoke about the complexity of water, and that's been very, very deliberate right from the word go, and talked about flow easements, which means that we're going to get flooded out, or those landholders in the seat of Murray and in the seat of Wagga are going to be flooded very regularly. And of course, the risk of flooding for Wagga, the insurance premiums go up, we cop it always. New South Wales needs to man up and actually look after its people, and that's not what's happening. So that's why a National Royal Commission will enable us to do that thing. So I ask the government to support a National Royal Commission. Thank you. Or a federal Royal Commission.
The question is the motion be agreed to. All of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.